No, I'm not. I think everyone can chat, but I'm not actually sure. This is my first time doing the webinar in Zoom, which is different from a meeting. So welcome, everyone. We're going to start at 6:30. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A. I may have disabled the chat, so go right to the Q&A, and there you should be able to put in your questions, tell us who you are, where you're from, and then when we ask questions at the end, we'll know who's asking them. All right. I'm just looking to see the group. Sounds good. All right. We're going to begin. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. Welcome to the Queens Public Library's webinar with Dr. Ellen Baker. I'm Rita Carl, Director of Programming, and I'm your host, and I'm joined by Jeffrey Lambert, the Strategic Director of Planning and Operations, who will be minding the Q&A. This is Women's History Month. Queens Public Library is celebrating changemakers, women who have been professional leaders and advocates for a more equitable world. Learn about our special programs and book recommendations and how to make your own Queens of Queens vision board and much more at queenslib.org/WHM 2024. Filing your taxes can be an overwhelming, complicated process, but it doesn't have to be. Queens Public Library is partnering with many organizations to offer free counseling for New Yorkers at several of our locations. Download our tax help brochure at queenslib.org/tax help. And finally, we have created a brand new QPL Teens Instagram page. Please help us celebrate the amazing teens in our Queens Public Library community while you learn more about everything we do for teens here. Check it out and follow us at instagram.com/QPL Teens. Today's guest is Dr. Ellen Baker, a geologist, medical doctor, and astronaut. As an astronaut, Dr. Baker flew on 3 space shuttle flights orbiting 250 miles or 400 kilometers above the Earth. Dr. Baker joined NASA as a medical officer in 1981, and in 1985, she became an astronaut. She logged over 686 hours in space across 3 missions. In 1989, Dr. Baker flew aboard the Space Shuttle Atlantis and helped deploy the Galileo spacecraft that went on to explore the planet Jupiter. In 1992, she flew aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia and worked in the first U.S. microgravity lab. For 2 weeks, the shuttle crew studied different sciences in a microgravity environment. In 1995, Dr. Baker was part of the first U.S. shuttle crew to dock at the Russian Mir space station, again on Atlantis. After being an astronaut, Dr. Baker served as chief of the education/medical branch of the NASA Astronaut Office until her retirement after more than 30 years of service to NASA. Dr. Baker grew up in Queens and went to Bayside High School. Her first degree is in geology from the University of Buffalo. Her doctorate in medicine is from Cornell University, and she's a master's degree in public health. And especially for our Queens Public Library community, Dr. Baker is the daughter of former Queensborough President Claire Schulman, the first woman to lead the borough. Ms. Schulman attended Adelphi University and was one of the first women in their nursing program. She worked as a registered nurse at Queens Hospital, where she met and married Dr. Melvin Schulman. The couple had 3 children, including our guest today. Claire Schulman was appointed deputy borough president in 1980 as the 17th president of the borough of Queens and the first woman to lead the borough. That was in 1986. As borough president, she went on to win 4 terms and participate in the revitalization of downtown Jamaica and Western Queens, as well as championing the development of many Queens cultural institutions, raising funding for infrastructure in senior living, public libraries, public schools, and cultural programs. Ms. Schulman left the Queensborough presidency in 2001 due to term limits, but remained active in the community until her passing. We are very grateful for Dr. Ellen Baker's time today. Please put any questions you have in the Q&A. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks so much for that introduction, and good to be back in Queens, if only virtually. As Rita said, I went to Bayside High School, and before that, Junior High School 158, and then PS 41. And I love telling people when I go around the country that there were so many schools in New York, we gave them numbers and not names. So I am a product of New York and a proud one at that. I'm going to share my screen here and just give you a little bit of an overview of what life is like on the space shuttle. You know, we've had several space programs, starting with the Mercury, then Gemini, then Apollo program. After that, we had a quick 2 or 3 year stint on a Skylab space station with 1, 2, and 3 month flights, and then a long 30-year history on the shuttle with 135 flights. The last shuttle flew in 2011, and we started to occupy the current International Space Station in 2000, and we have had more than 65 crews so far occupy the space station and conduct our business and our science and our exploration from up there. So I was very fortunate to be part of the shuttle program and did not fly on the space station except for the Russian space station, but was very lucky to be part of the design, development, and implementation of that program. So I like to show this picture because it reminds us that we are one little measly planet orbiting a small kind of average star in an unbelievably large and hard to comprehend universe. And I like to show this to my kids just to remind them they are not the center of the universe. But moving a little bit closer in, this is actually a picture from Saturn. You can see the rings. It's 900 million miles from Earth. And this little dot here, I hope you can see my pointer, is the Earth. So a bit humbling, if you will. And getting a little closer, if you were going to the moon, you might see the Earth as a beautiful globe. And this was a transformative picture, I think, for those of us who were alive and paying attention to the space program in the 60s. Getting a little bit closer, only 240,000 miles away, taken from the moon. And then getting even closer. And, you know, kids ask me all the time, where did you go when you were in the space shuttle? And it's sort of disappointing. I orbited the Earth, right? So yes, I was in space, but it was only about 250 miles above the surface of the Earth. So yes, we were in space, but we weren't that far away. And if you look out the window of the space station, this is sort of what it looks like. 250 miles up, you can just barely see the curvature. You can see thunderstorms, and I'll show you a lot of other features that you can see as well. But it all starts at one of the launch sites in the United States. We launch from Kennedy Space Center. The Russians can launch from Baikonur. The Chinese have a launch site as well. But Kennedy Space Center really has been the heart and the soul of all of our launch vehicles since 1961. This is the Soyuz Russian spacecraft launching, and now we have SpaceX, Elon Musk's company that also can launch people into space. Well, on the shuttle, once you got up on orbit, first thing we did was open the cargo bay doors. It helped to cool all of our equipment, and we transformed from a rocket ship, if you will, to an orbiting space lab. The Russians fly up to the space station in the Soyuz spacecraft here, and the little sort of round part at the end is their habitation module, and it could take a day or two to get there depending on their orbital trajectory, but it's a small vehicle. And one of the interesting things, particularly for the Russian space stations, were they didn't have a lot of space to carry things up and carry things back. It was easy to send their unmanned Progress vehicle up with a lot of cargo and food and supplies, but anything that they wanted to bring back was severely limited because they came back in a Soyuz spacecraft. The shuttle was sort of fat on space. We had a lot of places to put things and were able to bring a lot of things back. When we docked with the Mir space station, this is what it looked like. So you can see the habitable part of the shuttle is right at the front of the vehicle, fairly small, and the space station is huge. So we had the luxury, once we had a space station, to stay up for long periods of time, be able to run experiments for more than 1 or 2 weeks at a time, which is how long the shuttle operated. So we could run them across missions, different crews coming and going, and be able to run our studies and do our science on a much more continual and long-term basis. And since it's Women's History Month, this is Peggy Whitson, who was the commander of the space station, and Pam Melroy, who was commander of the shuttle, and they did the traditional handshake when the shuttle and the space station joined up. So a fairly rare event, though women are a lot more common in the space, in the astronaut office and in the space world now than they were even when I started 40 years ago. The fully complete space station is really big. If you look up in the sky at the right time, around dawn or dusk, you'll actually be able to see it. It looks like a bright star passing quickly overhead. And if you go to the NASA website, you'll be able to get the times and it'll tell you in which direction to look. But every taxpayer should get a look at the space station. It's really phenomenal. And to look up and think there's 6 people up there now, and to me, it's quite exciting. I still get a thrill to go out and gaze up in the night sky and see the station go overhead. And the first thing you notice when you get up there is up and down don't really have a meaning. So it's kind of remarkable how quickly you get used to floating, more or less, and looking at your world from every which way. So it's fun. It's initially a little disorienting, but really quite fun and interesting to see how you can look at your world and where you've trained and do it upside down, sideways, or whatever. And as I said, we have more women in the program now than we have in the past, and this is not an unusual event to see a number of women as part of the crews on the station. For the men, of course, and the crew always has a good time thinking up how to do their crew picture in space. So I actually really like this one, and you can see we're international crews. We have Europeans from the European Space Agency. We have Russians, Japanese Space Agency, obviously Americans, Canadians, all part of our program. And now, of course, we also have, we've always had some space tourists, if you will, who come up sort of for a one-time flight. They're not career astronauts, but they do get to visit the station and do a little work there. Well, when I said everything floats, I meant it. And every day is a bad hair day on the space station. This is Marcia, and she didn't normally leave her hair like this, but it's a good illustration of how things just kind of float around. Kevin Chilton with all of his food packaging floating. And what you can see in this picture is that there's lots of these little blue dots, and those are Velcro dots, and there's Velcro on the walls, and it saves us from losing a lot of our stuff because you cannot put it down on the table or set it down by your feet. It will float away. So it's really important to keep track of where your stuff is and to smush it down with some Velcro. The inside of the space station is very busy. It's been up there now for more than 20 years. We have brought a lot of equipment up and down. We have a lot of ongoing studies of all different types. There is a US laboratory module, a European Space Agency module, Japanese module, and Russian module. We share a lot of the common parts of the station, but we tend to do most of our national research, if you will, in our own space. Space is a premium, mass and volume are a premium, and so you really have to carefully figure out which scientist stuff gets to go to space station and how long it can stay. And it's a lot of work. Everybody's day is fairly heavily scheduled. We give the space station crews a lot more flexibility in how they fill their day. We give them a list at the beginning of the day and say, hey, these are the activities of the day. Figure out how to get it done. On the shuttle, we were very carefully scheduled. So if it was this time I had to do this and the next time I had to do that, and we didn't have a lot of flexibility. Our time was fairly limited, and we wanted to make sure we got everything done. But the space station crews have a little bit more laxity, so to speak, in their schedule, though their days are very full. They get to plan them themselves. So other than working inside the space station, what do we do? Well, we also do spacewalks for a number of reasons. Some because we have some experiments that are outside of the habitable module, but others to do repairs and maintenance and things like that. So we actually do quite a few spacewalks, and it's interesting how we train for these, because that suit weighs about 250 pounds, and it's not something that you can put on and just kind of walk around down here and practice doing things and using your tools. So we actually practice for doing spacewalks in a gigantic swimming pool. The suit is airtight, so it's also watertight, but the buoyancy in the water removes the feeling of weight on you. And so you're able, even though there's a lot of drag in the water, you're really able to practice what it is you have to do, learn to do certain tasks, so that when you actually do a spacewalk for real, you feel very comfortable and you're very adept at using the tools, and you've had a lot of practice and training for whatever that particular particular task is. You cannot simulate this in a pool. And while I trained to do spacewalks on all my flights, I never actually had to do one. But my colleagues tell me when you're out at the end of the remote arm with your feet in the little things that hold you onto the station, and you look down 250 miles, you really get an overwhelming sense that you're going to fall. It's quite interesting, but we've done many spacewalks. We've had mostly smooth operations, occasionally malfunctions with their equipment, occasionally a malfunction with the suit, but for the most part, we've done pretty well. So what about the ordinary tasks like eating, preparing meals? We've got an interesting mixture of food up there. On the shuttle, we flew mostly dehydrated food or thermostabilized food, like you might take on a camping trip. It's very lightweight. You add water, you can heat it up, but you don't have to cook it. But we have a lot more variety now on the space station, and the crew has a little more opportunity to mix and match. The Russians tend to fly things in cans. We tend not to fly things in cans, but there's a little bit of sharing of the food, and we want to make sure everybody's happy. You know how food can make you unhappy, so we want to make sure everybody's sort of happy with their food. They get an opportunity before flight to select some items, and for the most part, it works okay. I always said it was fine with me. I didn't actually have to go to the grocery store. I didn't really have to cook it. And then I didn't really have to wash any dishes afterwards. So as far as I was concerned, it was pretty easy. You can be creative in how you make your meals. We do carry a little bit of fresh food, and on the space station, the resupply mission comes up every 4 months, and we tend to pack a lot of fresh food in the Progress resupply vehicle so the crew can bite into an apple or a piece of fruit or something like that. We don't fly things that make a mess, pretty much like bread makes a lot of crumbs, but tortillas actually don't make many crumbs. And so we try to fly things that are more bite-sized and tend to be a little bit neater, if you will, in how you prepare them. And so this is how you make a taco in space, but this does not work at home. So be careful. And of course, there's always the required picture of astronauts playing with their food, and this is one of my favorite pictures. Same with drinks. We drink out of these bags, if you will, sort of like the Capri Sun soft bags that that our kids drink from. But again, an opportunity to do a little bit of off-road science and to see just how big you can get that glob of orange juice. This is what one of the drink bags look like. You can see it's got a straw with a stopcock on it, because if you didn't pinch that straw, the pressure just from the bag would push all that coffee out the straw. So that's coffee with sugar substitute. But one of the interesting things is you can drink your coffee with chopsticks. So again, many interesting little experiments you can do on the side at dinner time. The other thing we do a lot of in space is exercise, because being in space doesn't put the normal stress on your muscles and your bones as you might imagine. You don't have all that weight to carry around. And we want to make sure mostly that people are fit to return, that their muscles and their bones are not so weak that they're going to be injured when they return. It wasn't as critical on the shuttle, but for space station, we schedule about 2 hours of exercise for the crew each day. And that involves, getting ready and then cleaning up afterwards. But there's a good hour and a half of exercise on the space station. And this is really, really critical to keep the crew healthy while they're there, but really especially for when they return. So we've got a bike, but it's not like a regular bike. I mean, it's got pedals, but of course you're not sitting on a seat really, but you can get your legs moving and get a good aerobic workout. We've got a treadmill, and to use the treadmill, you've got to bungee yourself down, of course, or you'll float away. And interestingly, I'll talk a little bit about this later, but you can, we make an orbit every 90 minutes. So if you run on the treadmill for 90 minutes, you can tell everybody you ran around the world. And that's sort of true. We also have an apparatus that feels like weightlifting, so you can really give your muscles a good workout, and a variety of other things. But exercise is a real critical part of your day. And some people who were not ardent exercisers before flights come back actually in better shape because they do have to work out every day. If you're up there for a long time, you might want a haircut, but make sure you do it with a vacuum cleaner. Remember, everything goes everywhere. And the bathroom, I will just say it uses a lot of suction, if you can imagine. You've got these little bars on either side of the seat to put over your thighs so you don't float away while you're in the middle of things. But the bathroom works pretty well. But like I said, it uses a little bit of suction just to keep things going in the right direction. Sleeping is, I found it very easy. I had a 1-year-old at home on my first flight, and so this was really uninterrupted good sleep that I hadn't had in a long time. We give the crew scheduled 8 hours of sleep time every day. Some people use it, some people don't. I'm not an 8-hour-a-night sleeper, so I actually didn't use it. Some like to just find a spot in the middle of the station, maybe to take a nap. He sort of looks like a mummy there. But on the space station, we actually have sleep stations for all the crew because they're up there for a long time. It gives them a little privacy. It gives them a place to put their stuff, right? Their personal stuff. And it blots out some of the noise and the other activity that might otherwise keep them awake. We didn't have a lot of free time on the shuttle flights. They were only, 1 to 2 weeks long, and so we really filled up everybody's day. But the space station crews are up there for 6, 7, 8 months, and we tend to give them the weekend off so they can bring something up to relax or entertain themselves. Books, of course, we have electronic books now, but musical instruments, movies. In the last 10 years only, we've had access to the internet. We, of course, have to have a lot of firewalls, so those systems are completely separate from the spacecraft systems, but the crew has the ability to make a phone call through the computer. Very good reception. It's very funny to pick up the phone and it's somebody on space station who wants to talk to you. So we make sure that they don't feel so disconnected from Earth, and that they are able to enjoy some relaxation time and find something they like to do. Again, we've had some musical instruments up there. And I would say probably the most favorite activity, both for work and then for relaxation, is to pick up that camera and look out the window because it's really spectacular. A real privilege, and you feel just how lucky you are when you look out the window and you watch the Earth go by. Like I said, we make an orbit every 90 minutes, so we orbit the Earth 16 times a day. And if you think about it, at any given time, half the Earth is in daylight, half is in darkness. So with 16 orbits, you're going to see 16 sunrises and sunsets. So the sun is going to rise or set every 45 minutes. It's really hard to know what time of your day it is when the sun keeps coming up and going down. But, it's just magnificent to look out the window and see the world go by. These are the Andes Mountains. This is in Chile. Lots of volcanoes around the world, many of which are quite active. This is the Galapagos, which has many volcanoes which are no longer active. Lots of weather phenomenon, hurricanes. I live in Houston, and we worry about hurricanes for at least half the year. Watching them from above is really spectacular. And of course, I always feel so terrible for the people on the ground. Sandstorms, all sorts of weather phenomenon that you can see from space. Glaciers, they almost look like they're alive. And then a lot of man-made sorts of things you can see, like fires. We see lots of fires all over the world. Generally man-made, some not, but many are. And of course, that brings me to my favorite place to look at from space, which of course is New York. And can you see my pointer by any chance?
Yes.
Yes, you can. Okay, so here's LaGuardia right in the middle, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of the center of the Earth. And of course, you can see Manhattan and Central Park and the Throgs Neck Bridge and the Whitestone Bridge and the 59th Street Bridge. So it's really a beautiful sight on a clear day in New York. The George Washington Bridge up here.
Mhm.
Really, really interesting. And the interesting thing about looking at the Earth from space is, you know, we all did a lot of flying, and you could almost recognize a city by the configuration of the runways. Runways are easy to pick out. They're long, they're straight, and every airport has a little bit of a different runway configuration. So it was one way to figure out where you were. And then this is the other airport in New York, JFK, with Far Rockaway and Long Beach, and the other part of Queens, I guess, if you will. There were some very recognizable places around the world. I got better at geography. We actually do a lot of earth science studying before our flights. This, of course, is the Middle East, and this dark area here is the delta of the Nile River. So that's what it looks like when you look out the window. But if you're looking out the window with this camera, which is a very long lens, you can actually see the pyramids. So you get a great view of the detail, depending on what lens you've got on your camera. Okay, so I said 16 sunrises and sunsets. This is a sunset. And even from space at night, you get a beautiful picture of the world, and you can very clearly see the lights of Broadway here, but you can also pick out a lot of the cities, of course. And New York, of course, is very easy to identify. But here's that Nile River and the Nile Delta again, and you can see the lights of Cairo. But the interesting thing about this is that people tend to live where there's water, right? So the lights are along the water and along the river. And you can see Israel kind of lit up here, but really, really beautiful views even at night. And the other lights you see at night are lightning, which is all over the place. It almost looks like it's alive, particularly along the equatorial regions around the equator. Lots and lots of lightning and lots of storms. Very, very interesting. And something we don't see in New York City, but the aurora. So we got to have some great views of the aurora. It almost feels like you're flying through it when you're in space. And landing on the shuttle was very much like landing in an airplane. It was a little faster. The glide path to the runway was a little bit more steep, but it was in general a very gentle landing. Not so much with the Soyuz. They kind of plopped down on the ground. It's a hard landing, but we've got a number of features of the capsule and the seat to protect the crew so that they don't get hurt. And then the SpaceX landing, which is in the water. And if you land in Kazakhstan, this is what it looks like when you land. And then moving back out, there we are again by Saturn. And I'll just end with this picture. This is one of the deep field pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope. And they pointed the telescope at a spot in the sky that they had never seen anything in. It was a black spot. You know, if you kind of hold your finger up, it's like the size of your fingernail. And they left the shutter open for 8 days. And in this black spot in the sky where they had never seen anything, they found this, which is somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 galaxies. And these aren't stars, these are galaxies. Each galaxy has 100 or 200 billion stars. So there's an incredible world out there that we are really barely have discovered yet. We have some very clever, amazing astronomers who can put together these pictures and put together the story and the history of how this came to be, but it's just phenomenal when you think about it, that we are that little speck that you saw from Saturn. And with that, I will end and stop my share.
Thank you. That was wonderful. What a journey. I feel like we've run around the earth. We
Yeah.
have some wonderful questions from our amazing audience. We have 33 participants. We had 34 for a while. The first question is from Erin, and she wants to know what happens if you get sick in space.
Well, we try not to get sick. We are very, very well studied before we go, and we have to meet a lot of medical qualifications. So in general, we're healthy people. We don't come in with a chronic disease, for example. So we really minimize the likelihood of somebody getting sick, but we carry a medical kit, and we're really careful about what we do. The thing that we're worried about is really an injury more than a real sickness, though a sickness is a possibility. Somebody could get appendicitis or something like that that you really can't predict. The nice thing about the space station is you can be home in a day. If you're on the moon, you could be home in maybe 3 days, and if you're in Mars, you're out of luck. So we try to engineer out the likelihood of getting injured, and we carry an emergency medical kit, and we try to make sure that people are healthy and stay healthy while they're up there. Inevitably, somebody will get sick one day, and we've had minor illnesses like colds or upset stomachs, but really no catastrophic illnesses.
Thank you. This is from DJ, who's in Queens. For experiments carried out in the space station where everything floats, how are liquids handled if an experiment requires liquids or reagents?
So you have to contain liquids. You contain them in a bag, in a syringe, in a flask, in a vial, or whatever, but liquids have to be contained. The only the only exception might be you saw Terry with his hands in the glove box. So you've got a bigger containment space with the glove box, and you can do some minor experiments involving liquids if you've got a bigger containment area, and you can sop up the liquid with a cloth or something like that, or suck it up with some vacuum. But we have to contain them. We've got a lot of electrical equipment, and you don't want any liquid escaping. Now, that said, you also saw us playing with their drink bags and their coffee and their orange juice, and so we have to be careful about how we contain even the liquids that we drink.
Makes sense. So David from Forest Hills asks, what's the hardest task that you had to do in space?
I guess it depends what you mean by hard, but in terms of physical issues, I really didn't have any. Doing a spacewalk is hard. Training for them was hard. I only trained for what we would call a contingency spacewalk. So I was prepared to go outside the vehicle if something broke, but nothing broke, which is good. But you know, the hard thing is you have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of pressure. It's very public, right? So if you make a mistake, everybody knows about it, which I guess is okay, but there is that kind of pressure on you. We do a lot of training, and I will say, as a testament to our training, I felt very comfortable up there. So I felt like everything I was doing, I knew it inside and out. I felt like I had practiced it and trained for it before. And so I think that's a real testament to being well prepared, and how that will reduce stress and really ensure that you do your job and things go smoothly.
Thank you. Ashley from New York says, thank you so much for speaking with us today. What was the biggest adjustment for you after returning to Earth?
I had little kids when I flew in space, and when I came back, they don't let you sit around and feel like a hero. So I remember coming back from my first flight. We landed in California, and I was probably back home 6 hours later, doing a load of diapers and running the laundry. And, the cat threw up on the rug, and somebody had to clean it up, and that was me. So I didn't really have much adjustment. But in all seriousness, for astronauts who fly for long periods of time on the space station, it's a long several weeks before you feel physically really stable. We have a very intensive rehabilitation program for astronauts who spend a lot of time in space, a couple months in space. So we want to get them back in good fit condition. There's issues with balance and weakness and other sorts of things. So that's a real adjustment coming back. And of course, if you've been gone from home for several months, I think there's a readjustment to your world, your friends, your work, your family, et cetera. It's like being deployed if you're in the military, right? There's a period of adjustment after you come back. Not so much for shorter flights like I flew on the shuttle.
Mm-hmm. I know a story. June Scobie Rogers told me that when her husband came back from a flight, they were eating dinner, and he had something in his hand, and he just reached out and he just put it out, and of course it dropped, broke. But he just didn't. Those things you have to remember.
That never happened to me, but yes, I know that happens to some people.
Some people. I live in Queens. Happy Women's History Month. I'm a female engineer. This is one of our anonymous guests, and I worked on building the vertical tail of the space shuttle.
Wow.
And also on some items used on space station. I'm not an astronaut, but I feel part of the team.
Yes, and we need all those parts of the team. The shuttle was made all over the country, and one of the things I really enjoyed doing was visiting our contractors and our subcontractors who made all the different parts of the shuttle. It was really terrific, and it was an honor for me to go and meet folks who did this work and tell them how much we appreciated it and how important it was.
It really is. We have another guest who is asking, how do the female astronauts manage their menstruation in space?
You can manage it very much like you do here on Earth, or if you prefer, you can suppress it, which you can also do here on Earth. So it's personal choice for what you elect to do.
That's a great question, and thank you for that answer. Are personal devices, like a tablet, that is not related to work permitted? I think you mentioned a few things that were personal.
Yeah. We were allowed to bring music, and people are allowed to bring some personal entertainment devices, but we're very careful to shield all of the electronics and the air-to-ground sorts of communication from the internet, right? So we have a lot of firewalls.
Yeah, that's important. A guest has said, by the way, I met your mom, as in your mom, at Boy Scouts. I was in Troop 96.
Oh my God.
His name is David, and he wanted to say thank you very much. It's been a true privilege to attend. And someone asked if the recording will be made available later. It will on our YouTube channel. And the last question in our last 2 minutes, what is it like being in space?
That's such a hard question to answer, but it's interesting. It's a mix. I will say it's amazing that you are feeling like you're floating and to watch the earth go by, but it's also amazing at how quickly you adapt and feel normal, if you will. But I'd never lost the sense that I was so lucky to be there and that the world was so beautiful to watch as we orbited. And that wasn't it a shame that we couldn't all get along, right? The earth is really beautiful, and it's just hard to imagine how much ugliness can go on down here.
Yeah, we had a couple last questions that just popped in, one on that same topic. Do you get to keep up with current events while you're up in space?
You can, yeah.
You can. And of course, did you see anything that was unexplained when you were in space, or is that classified information?
It is not classified, and I did not see anything that was unexplained. I did not see Elvis. I did not see any aliens.
Well, I don't know if you can see all the emojis.
I can.
You can. So you can feel the love. It has been an honor to have you with us today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. We really enjoyed it. And thanks again for your love for Queens,
Yes.
and your connection. And shout out to your mom, who's one of our Queens of Queens for Women's History Month. And thanks again. Boy, the love just doesn't stop.
Okay, well, thank you, and nice to join you, and thank you for the invitation.
Thanks a lot. You have a great day.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.